And welcome everyone. We should be live. I'm just gonna give it a minute until I can see that you are all here with me in the chat. Hi Rose, hi Patricia, hello again Pisas. Hi again Tish. Let me know if you can hear me properly. So we are live from Spitalfields in London. It is nearly 9:30 p.m. UK time on 16th of February 2025. So if you're watching this and it's no longer February or it's no longer the 16th, you're watching a replay. So we've got about 11 minutes before to go. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. Let us know in the chat if you happen to be new. Hi Derek, welcome. Hi Natasha, nice to see you here. And hello again Sarah. Matthew, we'll talk about that towards the end of the tour. Yeah. So yeah, the DNA story has been all over the press again. So we'll talk about that. We'll address that at the end. There's nothing new, I'm afraid, but I'll explain all the fake news or the old fake news, because it's actually 11 years old, that news. So if anyone were completely new to me, and if you don't know what's happening, we're doing a live little walk in Spitalfields. We've got about 10 minutes before to start. So if you watch the replay in the next few days, if you are live with me right now, you'll have to wait. But if you're watching a replay in the next few days or years or months, if you want to go straight into the tour, feel free to skip the next 10 minutes precisely. And it is absolutely freezing in London. I think it's about 2 degrees, so it shouldn't be that bad, but there's a very cold little wind. I can see the chat here. Oops, what was it? Oh, the artist one. No, the artist is Walter Sickert. That's another suspect. I think that's the one you're talking about, Laurie. Hi, Lance. Nice to have you along. It's been a while as well. Al Manito, Manimo, welcome. So we've got about, let me check exactly, we've got 8 minutes before to start. And you know what, we'll make a move, because I'm not starting from here, I'm starting down there. Some of you might remember I used to sit on the little steps of the synagogue before to do the tour, and they've installed some kind of railings at the synagogue, so I'll have to sit here for the time being. And this is I Goat. It is a statue by Kenny Hunter that's it is meant to represent the different waves of immigration that made Spitalfields real, but some people think it's just a goat. Right, let's go down this way. So we've not started yet, we're just waiting for everyone to connect. Let us know in the chat if you happen to be completely new to me. It's always great to see a few new names. Hi John, nice to see you here. And salut Mike, nice to have you back. So it's very cold, but it's dry, so we're very lucky in that matter, because at least we've got no rain. And welcome Linda, nice to see you here. So we've got about 7 minutes to go. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. I Goat, Laurie, I like me, I Goat. I don't know why they called it I Goat, but that's the name of the statue. Your favorite tour, cool. You missed the goat, Tish. What have you been doing? Did you make a cup of tea? You'd have to check the replay. Well, I shouldn't be showing you anything exciting in the pre-tour. The pre-tour is made for you to have time to go to the loo and make a cup of tea. Hi, Rory. Well, it's nice to have you back. See, that's what I meant. I used to, before to do the tour, I used to sit on this little step here, That's part of the Sandys Row synagogue, but they've recently installed those railings. It's a bit sad because I think it might have to do with the conflict. You know, they might have been with all those protests. They might have been worried. They might have been vandalized or something. We've let me put this camera on. Hi, Shas. Hi, Jin. Hi, Michaela. Nice to see you here. Let me see what time it is. 5 minutes to start. Oh, I see I've got an email. If it's any of you dropping me a tip on PayPal or buy me a coffee, thank you very much. Those tips, I don't see them live, but I see I've got an email, so I've probably got one. Or it could be a completely different email. Who knows? Hi, Pauline. Do you want to look at property prices? I'll show you. I'm being lit up by an estate agent. Ooh. 1.6 million. How many bedrooms? Oh, 5 bedrooms. That's not bad. I mean, out of my budget, but still. Ooh, Stepney Green, 2 million. 5 bedrooms as well, but still. 900,000. Ooh, that's cheap. Whereabouts that is? Principal Place. Bull Street, 1 million. Well, no, nothing in my budget for today, I'm afraid. Not that I have a budget anyway. I mean, I think I'll be 60 years old when I maybe have a chance to get on the property market. And you cannot get a mortgage at that point, so London is quite expensive. Welcome everyone that just joined. We've got 3 minutes to go. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. So feel free to get to know each other in the chat. Well, you can do that through the tour as well. By the way, of course, this is interactive, so you can chat. Don't be shy. Chat away in the chat section. If I do miss any of your questions through the tour, I do apologize. Sometimes it goes a bit too quick for me. It's not that I'm ignoring you. It's that sometimes it's a bit too quick. Or sometimes I actually see the question. I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. I'll reply later, or then I forget later. So yeah, don't hate me. Does anyone have a spare million to tip me? Thank you, Mike. Well, you would have to add 30% to that, because 30% would go to YouTube or to the buy me a coffee or PayPal fees. So I'll need a bit more. What's the temperature? It is, according to Google, it's meant to be 2 degrees, but it feels much colder. And there is, hold on. Do we see smoke? I think there's smoke coming out of my mouth, so it does feel cold. Hi Claire, nice to have you here. And welcome Janice. What time is it? We've got 2 minutes to go. So if anyone was completely new to me, you're very welcome. I'm Natalie. This one I'm going to do. And I've not tested the microphone. Let's just double check that it's on and it's working. I'm just going to tap the microphone 3 times. Let me know in the chat whether you've heard it. Because I've got 2 little connection. I've got two little adapters, so it's very easy to lose the connection. Yeah, Jack the Ripper is often a popular one, so hopefully we'll be busy. Did you hear the tapping? You heard it, perfect. Good. So it's a bit windy tonight, so if at any point through the tour you start hearing some wind noises, let me know in the chat. That would be that I've lost one of the connections in the microphone, because I've got a professional microphone. You should not hear any wind at all. You heard 4 bangs. Yes, the 4th one would be a ghost, because I've definitely done only 3. It might be some of the Ripper victims coming to say hello. Oh yeah, you can see the smoke. So it is cold. See. And it is officially time to start. So welcome everyone, and without further ado, let's go. Let's flip this camera around and let's have a little walk into the East End of London. But before we go much further into the East End, let me show you. See above the pub there, you see the street name. It says Whitegate Street, and right above the term Whitegate, you've got a little crest. That is the crest of the City of London. So right here, I'm actually in the city. So if I was to, if you go down that way, you'll end up at Liverpool Street and all that. A lot of businesses and city boys. Not so much on a Sunday, of course. But that's the city with a capital C. So if I was to commit a little crime, like if I was doing this little graffiti, for example, and the police arrived, I'll have to deal with the city police. It's a different force. And we're gonna go towards the east. So on this side, it'll be the Metropolitan Police. Because see above the name of the street here, you don't see the little crest anymore. So we are no longer under the jurisdiction of the City of London. We are going towards, Tower Hamlet to be precise, but that's the patch of the Metropolitan Police. The two police forces, of course, they communicate very well. Back at the time of the Ripper, there were a couple of disagreements, but we'll talk about that later on. Now, London has changed quite dramatically since Victorian times, but this little street, Artillery Passage, it's one of the only ones that really kept its Victorian atmosphere. It looks pretty much like it would have looked at the time. Well, not exactly. At the time, you'd have a lot of traders coming in front of their shops. You know, butchers, for example, they would chop meat in front of their shop to attract some attention, and they'll be very loud on the streets, and they'll be chopping the meat with some pigeon dropping and everything on the street. And there were quite a few butchers around here because there were quite a few slaughterhouses. So that meant that if you saw a man late at night with a bit of blood on himself, you wouldn't necessarily feel very scared, because he might just be coming out of work, you know, from an abattoir, a slaughterhouse. So, you know, and also, you know, when I say Victorian times, you probably imagine lovely horse carriages and ladies with beautiful dresses and tiny, tiny, tiny little waist, gentlemen with a top hat and a cane and a long cape. Yes, in Westminster. Over here in the East End of London, it was much poorer. You wouldn't really see many gentlemen with a top hat. The top hats, you know, that was for high society. The people around here were really, really poor. There were a lot of homelesses and a lot of prostitution as well, sadly. Now, even if the gentleman with the top hat and a lady with a beautiful dress were to come over here, hi Sandrine, and welcome everyone that just joined. So the gentleman would very often walk fairly close to the wall. The lady closer to the wall and the gentleman next to her, because at the time, of course, you know, you didn't really have the public sewer yet. It was starting in Westminster, but not quite yet here. So you'd have people dropping their chamber pots through the windows. Just going to show you because I would like to put the camera on people's face. So yeah, you'd have those people dropping those chamber pots.
Hello, TikTok live! Like, share, favorite, everything.
Thank you. Not on TikTok though, but so yeah, it's funny because I flipped the camera around to try to not to frame them, and then they came into the camera. Anyway, so yeah, the gentleman would be more towards the middle, but the wife very close to the wall, because often people would drop stuff through the windows, like their chamber pots. We actually have an expression that comes from there. You know, when you go to the toilets in the UK, you might say, "I'm going to the loo." That's because back in the day, you know, a lot of people, especially the aristocracy and stuff, they spoke French for many, many years after William the Conqueror and all that. And very often, before to dump their chamber pots through the windows, they used to shout, "Garde à l'eau, garde à l'eau," which is old French, but it means mind the water. Not exactly water, of course, it was literally human waste. And those big top hats, by the way, they actually were full of mercury to make them waterproof, to protect you from the, from the rain, of course, but also from the urine you might get on your head. There's another expression that comes from there, not very polite, but I might as well tell you. You know, when you get a bit intoxicated, a bit drunk, you might say, "I'm shit-faced." Well, that is because people that were sober, when they heard "Garde à l'eau, garde à l'eau," which became the loo, they used to hide away. People that were drunk, sometimes they would look up, and they would quite literally get shit-faced. So that's where it comes from. And those top hats full of mercury, of course, that's also how we got the expression "mad as a hatter." Because the hatters, they used to handle mercury all day. And we know now that mercury is absolutely terrible for the brain. They didn't quite know at the time. Anyway, let me show you this building. So you can probably see a few students through the windows. Now it's a student accommodation, but it used to be a night shelter. This one was that was managed by Catholic nuns, so that was not like it wasn't a workhouse, but it worked quite the same way, really. You might be able to read over on top of the windows there. It says "woman," because you know in those night shelters or in those poorhouses or the workhouses, they used to split the families so they wouldn't enjoy themselves too much. If you guys don't know what those workhouses were, they were the accommodations for the very, very poor. When really, you know, Victorian society didn't treat the poor very well. They almost saw poverty as some kind of a sin, you know. They were the deserving poor and the undeserving poor, really, if you could not feed your kids, or if you couldn't put a roof over your head, if you could not even sell your body, the very last thing you could do was to come to the workhouse or to those night shelters. You'd have to queue at the door, so the ladies would have been queuing on this side. Then once you got in, you'd be forced to take a bath in some kind of a barrel of water that had been used by 50 people before you. And then you'd be given a bed, but then the next morning, you'd have to work. You'd have to work 10 to 12 or 16 hours, very hard labor. Very like oak picking or breaking stones and stuff like that to kind of pay back for your night. And if you've watched Oliver Twist, for example, or read the book, you'd remember at the beginning, Oliver is in the part for the kids, where he dares to ask for more soup, because they'll split the families. If the kids were over 7 years old, they'll be in a different building, and that's why it said women on the door, and on the other side it says men. I didn't show you because it was a bit too dark. Now, sleeping and living in those accommodations, that was quite hard because you'd have many people in a room. The beds, they looked more like a coffin. And of course, you'd have people with tuberculosis or people with bed bugs or people coughing and all that. So that was hard enough to live in there. But you did not want to die in there. Because, before 1832, we had a huge problem with body snatchers. Those body snatchers, if you followed my tours before, we talked about that quite a lot. But basically, there was a huge demand for human bodies. At the time, the only bodies that were given to science were the bodies from the executions, the criminals. There were some, but they were not enough. So we had a problem with people going to the cemeteries and the graveyards to steal the newly buried bodies to sell them to the anatomist. And that was a huge problem. So eventually in 1832, the church decided that people that died here in the workhouses, in the poorhouses, in the prisons, their bodies would be given to science. Let me show you this beautiful, that's what we call a ghost advertising. Well, actually, the company still exists, Denovan Bros. They do paper bags. That one sold for 2 million. It seems like it's back on the market. I see a Foster sign. But it did sell for 2 million 2 years ago. It's probably more now. Anyway. So yeah, those night shelters and workhouses, not a nice place to be. There's a bit of a gossip or a bit of a historical rumor that Mary Kelly actually used to stay there every so often, but there's absolutely no evidence of it. Although it's not because there's no evidence that it is not true, sometimes there's just no documentation that survived, but Mary Kelly, she was very, very mysterious. She's the most mysterious of all the victims, really. Anyway, I'm sure most of you know, but let's see. Do you guys know, or do you care to guess how many victims Jack the Ripper had? How many lives have they claimed? I said they because it could be a lady as well. Or it could be, it could be anybody. It could even be 2 men. That's why, when you saw, like the American news last week saying Jack the Ripper has been identified by DNA. Well, first, you cannot really identify Jack the Ripper because he's not a person. It's just a nickname we've given. We don't even know. We don't even agree on how many victims they had. So even if there was DNA evidence, that would only link him to one of the victims. So it wouldn't prove that he was Jack the Ripper. It would prove that he had been in contact with one of the victims. Anyway, 10, 5 known exactly. That's, known actually not. It's not even known. We don't even know for sure that those 5 were killed by the same killer. Exactly, Linda. Yeah, well, I'll be tempted to say 6. There was a murder a little bit earlier, Martha Tabram, that was stabbed 39 times. That's also what we call overkilling. So personally, I think Martha might have also been killed by the Ripper. But tonight we'll talk about the 5. Although personally, I'm not actually sure Elizabeth Stride was killed by the same killer. So it might be 5 anyway, including Martha and excluding Liz Stride. But we don't know. The truth is we don't know. In the autumn of 1888, the Metropolitan Police was investigating quite a few deaths. Well, in total, some say up to 11 in total. With a few later on as well. But really, most tripologists agree on 5. So tonight we'll talk about those 5, and that's it. Exactly, Rory. Anyway, this is the beautiful Christ Church of Spitalfields. It would have already stood here at the time of the Ripper. And very sadly at night, the graveyard was full of homelesses sleeping rough. Because the Metropolitan Police did not really allow them to sleep on the pavement. They'll be kicked away by the police officers. So they often slept in little courtyards or little graveyards. So that's quite sad. But there were a lot of people here at the time in this area that were semi-homeless. They'd stay in lodging houses when they had a bit of money for the night, or they'll sleep rough on the streets. Now, we don't know how many Jack the Ripper has killed, and you might have heard that he was killing prostitutes. In the last few years, people have started to question that. We don't know. Out of those 5, 2 of them had definitely sold their bodies at one point or another. It doesn't mean that they were definitely soliciting that very night. The 3 others, we don't know for sure. They probably were. They probably were casual prostitutes, you know, when really they couldn't pay for a bed for the night. But we don't know. There's no evidence that they definitely were. So whether they sold their bodies or not, we're not too sure. But what we do know is that the 5 of them were alcoholic. And everyone apart from Mary Kelly, they were homelesses as well, or semi-homelesses. Mary Kelly, the last one, was the only one that had a little studio. I'm gonna cross over. And the 5 of them would have probably drunk into that pub at one point or another. Jack the Ripper himself probably also visited whoever he was or whoever she was. Because, you know, we don't know for sure that Jack was a man. It could have been Jacqueline the Ripper, who knows? So the connection actually between the Ripper story and the pub is so strong that in the 70s they had renamed it the Jack the Ripper, and they were selling Jack the Ripper shots and everything inside. But you know, it didn't look very good to have a pub named after a serial killer, so they went back to being called the 10 Bells. I'm gonna cross over so you get a better view. It's quite a cool pub, and it is haunted. Well, allegedly. There are many pubs in London that claim to be haunted. For some of them, it has become almost like a little marketing boost. But I have to say, the 10 Bells is the only one where I actually had a weird experience myself. One day after finishing this tour, I went into the pub to go to the toilet. For many years, I had heard that when you go down to the loo, into the ladies in particular, if you wash your hands and look into the mirror, you might see a tall lady behind you wearing like a green dress. And I had heard that before. And that day I went to take a picture because I wanted to show you the inside of the toilets. Let me show you the photo. You can see how old is the photo because I had COVID face mask, so that would have been 5 years ago now. I don't know if you can see, but see the mirror looks it looks very dirty because it's actually a fake mercury mirror. It's so it makes it very easy to have some drunken hallucinations. But can you see behind me? I see a shape. I don't know if it's just the dirt in the mirror or some kind of a double reflection or whatever, but who knows? I'm not sure it is Liz Stride. So people say that it would be the ghost of Lucky Lizzie, Elizabeth Stride. She was the 3rd victim. Now you might ask me, if she's a Jack the Ripper victim, why is she called Lucky Lizzie? Well, she was so-called lucky because she's the only one that was not disemboweled. She had her throat slashed on the streets as well, very quickly in the dark. But she kept her uterus because most of the other victims, they had been cut open from the breast to the anus. Some of their organs were missing. Most of them were missing their uterus. So Lizzie did not have any mutilation. Some say that maybe it was a different killer. or some say, most people agree to say that the killer was interrupted, that he did not have the time to do his weirdest fantasies, so he then ran to the city of London to strike again. So that's the night of the double event. And the fourth victim was Catherine Eddowes. That's where we'll finish the tour. Because Jack the Ripper in 1888, he did not think about me. You know, he could have put his victims in geographical, in order, but no. So we've got to finish with number 4. Anyway, across the street there's not much to see today. But back in the day, that would have been the entrance to Dorset Street, and at the back, that's where you had Miller's Court, where number 35 was Mary Kelly lived. Mary Kelly, she's the only victim that was found indoors, and that was a butchery. The killer had managed to come in. She had been drinking at the 10 Bells that night, and she probably went back inside with a customer. Mary Kelly, it's almost certain that she would have been soliciting that night. Although her window was broken, someone could have just sneaked in. But we have there's a new theory in the last few years. Because thanks to Hallie Rubenthal, the author, claiming that the victims might have actually been killed through their slips instead of. It's funny when people try to be on camera, but they actually come behind me when I'm not on selfie cam. I'm facing the other way, so they go silly and no one sees them on camera. Anyway, so yeah, Hallie Rubenthal claims that the victims might have actually not been soliciting. They might not have been with a customer. They might have just been sleeping rough, which is possible with some victims, like Annie Chapman. We'll talk about her in a moment. But with Mary Kelly, it seems fairly obvious that she would have gone inside with a man herself. And there was a butchery, Kelly's murder. I've decided not to show you any photographs of the post-mortem in my tours, because I thought if I was going to be murdered myself, I wouldn't want pictures of my naked, disassembled body to be exposed to people on YouTube 137 years later. So I don't want to show you, but if you were curious, you can Google them. The photos are on the internet. Oh, you have a copy of the book. It's a great book, Sandrine. She's done a lot of research into the lives of the victim. Yeah. So yeah, Mary Kelly, there was a butchery. There was blood everywhere. You could hardly recognize her. She had been cut open, and her heart was never to be found. The guts were all over the room. He had cut some skin and folded it and placed it on the bedside table. It was one of the first crime scenes photographs in history. The first one was actually in Lyon, in France. But that was not a real crime scene. They had taken the body to recreate the crime scene. When Mary Kelly, that was literally the crime scene. Anyway, you might have seen the street's name. So that's Fournier Street. That sounds very French, because it is. Yes, Matthew, we'll get to that at the end. She didn't say Mary, but she said, she said Mary Ann Kelly. So that's very similar, yes. But we'll get to that. So this one is Mary Jane Kelly, and the other one said Mary Ann Kelly. So that could be a confusion there. If you believe in the conspiracy theories, but we'll get back to that. Now, I've shown you the name of the street that is very French, because the first wave of immigration that really shaped this area, it is the Huguenots. The Huguenots, they were the French Protestants. Some of you might know in France we had some war religion. You had the Saint Barthélemy massacre, and a lot of those French Protestants, they left France, and they came to London. They didn't come only to London. They went to many different areas, Germany, Canada, but some came here and they settled here. They were into the weaving industry, so they kind of shaped a bit of Spitalfields. And the second wave of immigration was in the 1880s. A lot of people from the Jewish community came from Poland. Well, there was Russia at the time, but and eventually, in the 60s, we had a third wave that also shaped Spitalfields. It is the Bengali community. See, if you see the name of the street there, Wilker Street, it is written in English, of course, but underneath you see it's written in Bengali as well. So the local council they want to include the local Bangladeshi community, and they wrote it in Bengali as well. So that's quite cool. Janice is asking, was Mary Kelly's face cut off? Yes, he had cut off most of the skin on the face. You could hardly recognize her. One might argue that it was not her. That's actually an interesting detail, but there's a witness that was quite certain they had seen Mary Kelly walking down the street in the morning when she was already dead. So some said that maybe they put somebody else in her position, to pretend she was dead for some reason. Who knows? It's a bit far-fetched, but anything is possible, really. And anyway, this is a beautiful area that looks very much like it would have looked at the time. It has been used for many movies as a filming location. If you've seen the show Luther, BBC show, one of the characters lives in one of this one. I don't know if it's this one. Suffragettes as well. Some of the movie has been filmed here. Quite a few movies and documentaries. I'm going to try not to be too loud in this street because they don't have double glazing, and the sound of my voice can sometimes be a bit much for them because it's not too late. It's nearly 10 o'clock. Anyway, little disclaimer. We are going to talk about Annie Chapman. She was killed at number 29 Hanbury Street, which is the parallel. It's just behind my back. But the building has changed. It doesn't look the same anymore. So I'm going to show you this one because it looks quite authentic. It looks a bit Victorian. So it probably looks quite similar than number 29 would have looked like, but it's not this building. Now, this one is often used for filming, for movies, so that's why they've not really renovated the facade, because they want to keep it looking old. Now, Annie Chapman, she was only the second victim, well, the second of the 5, but that was already a big deal in the press. The Jack the Ripper story, really, you could kind of say that it was the first international tabloid sensation. It was all over the press, and really everyone cared. She was the only victim that was found at daytime, so she would have been killed at about 5:30 a.m. But it was already bright when they found the body, and she was found. So the little door there that often leads into a little courtyard. Those doors, it was extremely poor. You often had big families living all together, cramped into one bedroom. So there was no space for privacy. In the same bedroom, you could have a little boy taking a poo in a chamber pot, next to a teenage girl cooking dinner, next to the parents making more babies. There was no space for privacy whatsoever. And in the little courtyard, they had. Cool. We are back. I do apologize. I've lost you for a sec. Thanks ever so much, Natalie. So yeah, the sex workers as well as the homelesses, they would have known that little door was left open all night. So did Annie Chapman go inside to sleep in the courtyard, or did she go inside? I'm gonna make a move then if it's still buffering. Or did she go inside to sleep? We don't know. I'm just gonna wait until you tell me we are back. Let me know when we are back. Let me know in the chat. I'm gonna try not to say anything too interesting until you tell me that the signal is back. It should be back, but I wanna check before. Okay, I think we might be back because I'm getting a lot of messages now. We've lost quite a few people. Hopefully they'll come back. Is it any better now? Let me know. You know what, I'm gonna stand here because I think it's, oh cool, we're back, Sam, amazing. Oh, people say it's still buffering. Hold on, I'm just gonna wait. It's good, okay, perfect, lovely. So I'm just gonna repeat what you might have missed, okay, because I'm not sure exactly when it cut. So I'm just gonna repeat about Annie Chapman. So Annie Chapman, she was found in that little courtyard. Whether she went in there with a customer as a sex worker, and then that customer would have attacked her, or whether she went into the little courtyard to sleep, as she didn't have the money for a night in a lodging house, it's anyone's guess. Really. We don't know for sure. What we do know is that she was found in the morning. She was also disassembled. Her uterus was missing. And she was also missing 2 little rings, fake, no silver or gold or anything, just fake. That was quite odd because she was homeless. So she used to keep with her everything she owned. So why were the little rings missing? That's, we know now that serial killers, they often take a little souvenir, a little trophy. Well, he already had the uterus, but he might have taken the rings as well. And now, before we go much further, this is, you might see the minaret at the top. This is now a mosque. It's a very interesting building because it has gone through the 3 different Abrahamic religions. It was first a Huguenot church, so Protestant. Then it became a synagogue, and now it is a mosque. So it literally followed the different waves of immigration. So that's quite cool. And anyway, we are in the famous Brick Lane. So it's quite a trendy area today. I was saying the last wave of immigration were people from Bangladesh. Actually, no, the last wave of immigration, that was the hipsters. They came about 15 years ago with their tattoos and their quinoa sandwiches and their little vintage shoes. So now it's a very trendy area, very expensive actually. It doesn't look like it, but it's very expensive to live here. But back in Victorian times, it was the opposite. It was extremely poor. It was sadly a place where a lot of people were homeless, and you had a lot of dust houses. Those dust houses, they were the accommodation for the very, very poor. They were like, imagine like a hostel, but you'd have like 40 people in a room, maybe a bit less. And some of them, when I say you'd get a bed for the night, it's not always exactly a bed. I'll show you the type of beds. So that was a bed that you'd get for 4 penny. To give you an idea, 4 penny, that was about the price of a pint of gin. Because, a lot of those ladies were alcoholic. So often they'll get the 4 pennies, begging or selling their bodies, because it was also the price of the job of a prostitute in a dark corner. And then you'd get your 4 penny, you'll drink it away, and then you'd have to get your 4 penny again to have a bed for the night. So those beds they look a bit more like a coffin than anything else, really. And if you did not have the 4 penny, if you had 2 pennies, you could buy yourself the rope. Now, I know it sounds horrible, and it's hard to imagine how the rope might be any nicer than sleeping on the floor, But you'd have to remember that they couldn't sleep on the pavement. They'll be kicked away. So the only alternative was to be in a graveyard or in a courtyard. And of course, it was often cold and wet. It is London, so it was actually better to sleep on a rope in a dark, dry room. And some say that it could be the origin of the phrase being hangover, when in the morning the landlord would come and remove the ropes, and everyone was feeling very bad. That's only one of the explanations. Some say that it might come from the executions as well, because when they had the public executions, they until 1868 you had those public hangings. People drank a lot. They'll bring the kids, they'll bring the family, liters of ale and gin, and the next morning, the day after the hangings, sometimes they woke up feeling a bit rough. So it would make sense as well. So we don't know exactly which it is. I think I prefer the hangings, but hey ho. Anyway, so the street was full of those dust houses, and very sadly, most of those ladies would, because they were addicted to alcohol, so often they'll drink their money away, the money they had for the dust house, and then they'll find themselves on the street again. So, whether they were sex workers or not, it's not really. It doesn't make any difference really, because even if they were all sex workers, it doesn't mean that the Ripper was targeting sex workers. It's just that in the middle of the night, you don't have many, what they would have called at the time, respectable ladies on the street. And Polly Nichols, the first one of the canonical five, she had fallen into hard times. Most of the victims were not young. Apart from Mary Kelly, the last one, she was in her 20s. Most of them were in their late 40s. Polly, she had gone through a divorce, and her husband refused to pay her a pension because he claimed she was selling her body. Whether it was true or not, we don't know. But at the time, if she even slept with one man, she would have been accused of prostitution anyway. And those ladies on the street anyway, the police would call them unfortunate. That was almost like a synonym of a sex worker, really. And was the other one when they would put them in a church pew, or was it just in the Johnny Depp movie? Oh, I don't remember that. Do you mean sleeping in the church? I don't remember in the movie. I've seen it a few times, but I don't remember. Not sure, John. Anyway, Polly, the last night alive, she came for a drink here. Today, it's no longer a pub; it's a noodle, Chinese noodle place. It's still quite typical. You see the tub there? That's quite typical of the Victorian pubs. It used to be called the Frying Pan Alley, and that's where Polly was drinking. So she was definitely drunk that night, and she told people that she had drunk her dust money. So those accommodation, those lodging houses, they were known as the dust houses. So she told people she had drunk her dust money 4 times. So she went back to the lodging house where she had been staying, and the owner said, "No, Polly, you know the drill, no pay, no stay." Now, he was not being mean or anything. He had a business to run, It's not like if they could accommodate every drunk that didn't pay. So she famously said, "Don't worry, look at my jolly bonnet, I'll soon get my dust money." Now, people have used that very sentence to guess that she was selling her body. Yeah, she might have. She might have meant, yeah, look at my jolly bonnet. I'm gonna go and solicit, and because I'm cute, I'm gonna get a customer. But not necessarily. She could have meant, look at my jolly bonnet, I'm gonna go and sell it. Or look at my jolly bonnet, I'm gonna go and beg. It doesn't really mean Well, she probably did go to solicit because she actually ran into another friend. That friend was the keeper of a lodging house. She could have accommodated her for free. She just had her pride, and she said, "No, I'm coming with my this money." As much as with Annie Chapman, I do think she could have been sleeping when the Ripper arrived. With Polly, she was killed on Bucks Road. We're not gonna go because it's a bit further down, but it doesn't look like the most comfortable place to come on sleep. So she probably was soliciting, but we of course we don't know for sure. Now that first murder was interesting. What happened is. There was a gentleman that was seen on Box Row standing. So he was standing up. Sometimes when you look at a documentary or anything, they kind of manage the truth to fit their narrative. So the guy was standing, and there's another guy that came behind him, Robert Paul. And it turned up that he was standing right next to the body. So he went to see Robert Paul, and he was like, "Come and have a look, mate. There's a lady on the floor." Allegedly, the first guy, his name is, he went under the name Charles Cross, but his actual name was Charles Lechmere. So he had lied about his name to the police. He allegedly was on his way to work when he spotted a big bundle of clothing on the floor, and he would have been like, yeah, because at the time, any items of clothing, any rags, you could have sold them. There was a value into any type of fabric. And as he got closer, he would have realized that it was not a pile of clothing. It was a drunken lady at first, and then he realized she was dead. So that's when he went to tell the other guy that had appeared behind him. Now, at the time, the police didn't see anything suspicious with that. Well, at the time, the police even didn't realize that it was the man that found the body, because what they did is that he went to tell the other man, but both of them were allegedly late for work. So then they were like, okay, we'll tell a police officer along the way. And actually, the second man, Paul, didn't believe the lady was dead, because at that point, there was no blood yet. So she probably would have just been killed. So he didn't bleed quite yet. And they didn't notice the abdominal injuries, because it was under her skirt and all that. And so they went to tell another police officer, but that police officer did not even stop what he was doing. He came a bit later, and then you already had PC Neil on the spot. So it actually took a while before they realized that PC Neil had not been the first person to find the body. Now, today, the modern ripologists, they think that Charles Cross, so the first man on the scene, the first that was the man that was stood right by the body, that he's actually a very good suspect. And I agree. I mean, he definitely had the opportunity. He was there, and the pathologist agreed that she would have just been killed. Now, there's a documentary about Lechmere somewhere where they did kind of like a sketch where he's kneeling over the body. He's not kneeling, he was stood up. And actually, interestingly, the other guy, Robert Paul, told him, "Oh, do you think we should sit her up?" And Lechmere said, "No, I don't want to touch her," when he had already touched her anyway. But you'd think if he was the killer, he would have wanted to touch her anyway to have an excuse to have some blood on himself. Anyway, he's a good suspect. Some people nowadays are convinced that Lechmere did it. I mean, I agree. He had the opportunity. He was definitely living very locally and stuff. Personally, my only problem with Lechmere as a suspect, it's that why would he have stopped? For me, serial killers, they don't stop. They go crescendo and crescendo and crescendo until they are locked up or dead or gone. So, because Lechmere lived in the area another 35 years, why would he not have stroke again after Mary Kelly, you know? But yeah, he's a good suspect. There are many suspects. And the fact that he lied about his name to the police, Cross was also kind of his name. It was basically the last name of his stepfather, but he registered under the name Lechmere anywhere else. So, you know, the fact that he didn't really give his real identity at the inquest is also kind of suspicious. And anyway, I did not even tell you how we got the name Jack the Ripper. Because, of course, we don't know whether the killer was named Jack, because we don't know who the killer was. The name Jack the Ripper came with a lot of those letters that were sent to the press. So to the press, the police, and the Whitechapel Vigilante Committee, at the time of the murders. Your ancestor was a suspect, Joy. Which one was that? Oh, interesting. Let me know which suspect. There were hundreds of them, so I might not know them, but let us know in the chat. You know, it's actually quite sad because, yes, those ladies have been killed and it's terrible. But the Jack the Ripper story, it has also ruined the reputation of many men that were wrongly accused. You know, and even some of them many years later, they're long dead and suddenly they're being accused of being Jack the Ripper. Because you could build up a case against pretty much any Victorian man, you know, like Lewis Carroll. He was also a slightly ridiculous suspect, but he was one of them as well. Bell Smith. Oh, I'll have to look him up. I don't think I know about Bell Smith, Joy. I'll have to look him up. Thank you. At the time, the press and the Vigilante Committee and all that, they received a lot of letters claiming to be from the Ripper. Most of them were rubbish. I mean, if not all of them, most of them were hoaxes. And it was not only from London. Some people in Wales, for example, will have a fight with their neighbour and they'll send a letter to the police, to Scotland Yard, saying, my neighbour is Jack the Ripper. But the police had to follow any leads, really. And one of those letters was signed Jack the Ripper. And that's how the press picked up the name. Some of those letters might have been written by journalists anyway, that wanted to spice up a little bit the story. We are now on the Petticoat Lane Market. It's no longer called Petticoat. It's Wentworth Street. I think it's Queen Victoria that she found it a little bit too titillating, so they had to rebrand the street. It was at the time the street. Well, it's still today. It's a market street, but at the time, most of the traders would have been from the Jewish community. And now, talking about suspects. So we've got Lechmere, of course, he's one of them, and he's a good one. And there's one that I have to address. It is Aaron Kosminski. Now, I'm not personally convinced by the Kosminski theory, but it is true that the man would tick all the boxes. Aaron Kosminski was what they would have called at the time a lunatic. He was addicted to solitary vices, aka masturbation. At the time, they thought masturbation was really, really bad for you, you know. It would drive you mad. And he had assaulted his own sister, and he ended up in a lunatic asylum. Not quite straight away. I think he was first in asylum in 91, so not straight after the murders. And he had worked as a barber. Marlene says a butcher. Well, you know, because those murders would have been committed in very dark streets. You know, today we're lucky we have a lot of electric lighting, but at the time those streets would have been extremely dark. And you know, the cutting was quite neat. I mean, it probably wasn't chirurgical, but you know, to try to remove organs very quickly like that in the dark, some people assumed he had some kind of anatomical knowledge. So yeah, he could have been a doctor, yeah, sure. But he could have been a butcher. Because, the anatomy of a pig is not that different from the anatomy of a human. And of course, the barbers, they used to be a bit, they used to do a bit of surgery back in the day. If you had a verruca on your face and you wanted to have it cut off, you'd go to the barbers. You had a teeth to pull out, you'd go to the barbers. So they had some kind of anatomical knowledge as well. So Kosminski would also tick that box, although he had not worked in many years. He was not in a mental state to be able to take a job, really. And the story with Kosminski, it's very it's a bit confusing, really. We don't really know when we talk about Kosminski if we're talking about the right man, because his name was hardly ever mentioned, but it is mainly in the Melvis Macnaghten Memoranda, a book written by a gentleman from Scotland Yard, that he claimed that he actually believed in Montague Druid as a suspect even more, but he also claimed that it could have been a Polish Jew that died in an asylum. And somehow we think that is Kosminski, but actually Kosminski did not die. He was still alive when that was written. He actually died years later. And although he was sent to an asylum, he was actually sent about 2 years later. There was another gentleman that was from Poland that was actually called Nathan Kaminski. And he was sent into an asylum just after the Kelly murder, actually. And he had died. When we talk about Aaron Kosminski, we're not even sure we're talking about the right guy. It could have been Nathan Kaminski. I think at the time there was a lot of anti-Semitism, and that was quite easy to always blame, the foreigners and stuff. And sadly, the police at the time might have been a bit prejudiced. And it's not like if the police had unanimity on their suspect anyway, because Inspector Abeline, that was actually on the investigation. Macnaghten, he actually joined the police later on after the case. Abeline did not think Kosminski was a good suspect at all. And clearly, I say suspect at the time. Today we'll call him a person of interest. If really he was such a person of interest, they would have followed him up. They would have known exactly when he died and stuff. So clearly he wasn't such a big suspect at the time. Otherwise they would know that he wasn't dead. I don't really believe the Kosminski theory, but he does tick all the boxes. He was a lunatic. He was some kind of a sexual pervert. And he did get locked up eventually. So, I agree that the killer would have had to be locked up to stop, or moved, or died, or whatever. And also Kosminski would fit the description because of the famous non-clue. Now, this little doorway here, at the time in 1888, the vast majority of the people living in the building would have been from the Jewish community. So were the traders on the market. To give you an idea, on Brick Lane at the time there were 27 Jewish tailors. So there was a huge Jewish community around here. And after the fourth murder, so the murder of Catherine Eddowes, so that's where we're heading to next. We'll go into that murder site. But after Catherine Eddowes, they found in the little doorway here on the floor part of her apron. At the time they used to have this kind of like a little apron over their dresses. So that's true. We know for a fact that it came from Eddowes' apron. The fabric was full of blood and feces. We don't know why the killer took part of her apron. Maybe just to clean his knife, or to carry the kidney and the uterus he had stolen. we'll probably never know. And on top of that clue, there was a little graffito on the wall. I say graffito because graffiti is plural. So a little graffito written with chalk on the wall. On it read I don't know, what did I say, a joke? Are you laughing at what I said? I don't know. I don't remember what I said now, you see. The graffito read, "The Jews won't be the men to be blamed for nothing." It didn't say the Jews, it said the Jewess. So that'll be Jewes. Most people assumed that they meant the Jews, but technically they didn't write the Jews. Did they make a mistake? Personally, I find it hard to believe that a murderer running away from a murder scene would take the time to write a little graffito on the wall. I think it's probably just a coincidence. I think there were a lot of anti-Semitism in the area. So personally, I think the clue probably has nothing to do with the murder. But the Metropolitan Police, it's their patch here, they did not want to raise the anti-Semitism in the area. And they didn't want the people going to work at the market to see that before on their way to work. So they decided to erase the evidence, when the city police would have wanted to take a photograph of it before that. So there was a bit of a disagreement there. Also there was a mistake, the Jewess won't be won't be blamed for nothing. That's a double negation. Won't, nothing. We don't do the double negation in English, but you do it in some languages, in French, in Yiddish. So, it could, personally, I think it's very random and it's just a coincidence. But if you hear that a lot of people thought Jack the Ripper was Jewish, that's part of the reason why. Anyway, quick stop here to show you the graffiti. This one here, it's from two amazing artists. The part to the right, it's Zabou. She's a French artist, a French Londoner. And the part to the left, it is Jimmy C. Jimmy C, we talked about him before in some of my tours. He's developed some kind of pointillism technique. He's originally from Australia, so he studied Aborigine art. And this one here, it's probably the longest running piece of street art I know in London. It's been here since I do tours. It's been here for at least 7 years now. The average life of a piece of street art in London, the life expectancy is usually 3 months before to be repainted or gone. And this one is not my favorite. Your tour guide is lying to you. The artist clearly knows that every day you have at least 10 Jack the Ripper tours coming this way. And it is true, to an extent, we are all lying. I mean, even myself, I'm not a ripologist. I'm not one to go to the archive or to go back to the original sources. I just repeat stuff I've read in books or on documentaries or with the ripologist I follow. But the thing is, most people kind of arrange the fact because they want to fit their narratives. Even a few years ago, you had the BBC documentary that kind of wanted to frame Kosminski, and they also arranged some of the narrative. Even the BBC. So, you never know what to believe anymore. Anyway, see the little crest is back there? So we are back in the city of London. So now we are on the patch of the city police. Thanks ever so much, Linda. So, in terms of suspects, there's one that we've not mentioned yet. It's not my favorite, and I don't think it's any believable, but it's a good story, so it has to be told. It's a bit bonkers, but it is Prince Eddie. Prince Eddie, his name was actually Victor Albert, because they choose their names. He was the grandson of Queen Victoria. So in the line of succession, he would have been like the little George today. And he was, people had some doubt about his sanity. He was allegedly a great fan of sex workers. They had some luxurious sex workers in Westminster, but no, he would have liked the one from Whitechapel, the one missing teeth and all that. And one of them would have got pregnant with Prince Eddie. Again, very far-fetched. There's no evidence of any of that. And Queen Victoria would have heard of that baby, and it was said that he had secretly married her. And technically, if that was to be true, that baby would have been the heir to the throne. Imagine that, the heir to the British throne being the son of a prostitute. So they said that Queen Victoria couldn't have that, and she would have asked her physician, Sir William Gull, to eliminate those 4 prostitutes that were aware of the royal baby. You might have noticed I've said 4 prostitutes, not 5. I'll tell you why in a moment. Exactly, that's basically the storyline of the From Hell movie with Johnny Depp. Now, Sir William Gull, he was actually, I think he was 78 or something like that at the time, and he had had a stroke. Would he have had the physical strength to fight those ladies? I'm not sure. I mean, those ladies were rough. I don't want you to imagine them vulnerable. I mean, they were vulnerable because they were drunk and they were malnourished and all that. But really, Annie Chapman, to give you an example, the week prior to the murder, she had got into a fight with a lady over a bar of soap. And the other lady was more damaged than Annie. So those ladies were rough, they were drunk, they were ready to fight. So I don't think Sir William Gull would have had the strength to fight them. Anyway, and it's a good story, but really it's completely far-fetched. Some say that it was not William Gull, but Prince Eddie himself, because Eddie would have got contaminated with syphilis. And syphilis goes with stages, but on the last stage, it does attack your brain. So you would have the symptoms of mental health issues as well. And that he would have decided to attack those prostitutes that gave him such a disease. Again, good story, but no, and he's got an alibi anyway. One of the murder, Prince Eddie was in Balmoral having dinner with Queen Victoria. So no, it's not possible. Prince Eddie, by the way, he died quite young. He died of some kind of flu, so he never ruled. Some thought it was a good thing, and so yeah, it's a cool story, and it makes great movies and great books. But I don't think there can possibly be any truth behind it. And the theory is that Mary Kelly might have been aware of the royal baby, and she might have tried to blackmail the royal family. And why not? But not very believable. Now we are now behind the prostitute church. This beautiful building here, it is St. Botolph without Aldgate. And at the time it was known as the prostitute church, because although prostitution was of course illegal, everyone was aware that it was going to happen anyway, and they came up with a couple of rules that the sex workers would have to abide by to avoid being arrested. They were not allowed to loiter, and they couldn't actually solicit. They had to wait to be approached. So it is said that at the time, dozens of sex workers, up to 100 sometimes, were walking around the church here. So they kept walking around in circles, waiting for customers to approach them. Now, we do not know whether that's what Catherine Eddowes was doing. Eddowes, it's the same. We don't know for sure whether she was selling her body. She did have a boyfriend. She was definitely an alcoholic. Even her kids didn't want to see her anymore because she was too bad. And she had just come back from Kent, from Maidstone, when she had been hop picking. But it was a very bad harvest that season. So her and her boyfriend had walked back all the way from Kent, and they were penniless. So they had sold. I'm just gonna wait. They'd sold some boots, so they had enough money for him to go into a lodging house. But Catherine said, "Don't worry, I'm gonna go and beg my daughter in Bermondsey, so she'd give me some money for the dust house." That probably was not true, because her daughter, although she still lived in Bermondsey, she actually lied to her mother about her address. So Catherine could not possibly go and visit her daughter because she didn't have the correct address anyway. She probably didn't go anywhere near Bermondsey, because a couple of hours later she was found somewhere around here. Yeah, Marlene. So she was found on the pavement, absolutely, completely drunk. She was on the street, on the floor, making animals noises. She couldn't even stand up. We've all been there, right? And she was taken by the police. She was arrested. She was taken to Bishopgate's police station, where she was annoying. She was annoying the police officers, and they were like, "Give us your name and address." And she said, "Nothing." So they put nothing into a cell. She slept for a little while, but then she woke up and she was annoying the police. She was like, "When are you gonna let me go?" And they were like, "We'll let you go when you can take care of yourself." She was like, "I can do that right now, you old cock." And eventually they said, "Okay, right, we'll let you go if you give us your name and address." She said, "Okay, I'll give you that. I am Mary Ann Kelly, and I live at number 6 Fashion Street." And then they let her go about 1 a.m. She was certainly completely drunk. You cannot sober up in a couple of hours for such quantities of alcohol. She just said Mary Ann Kelly. And of course we know that the next victim is called Mary Jane Kelly. So that's she's not Mary Ann Kelly anyway, she's Catherine Eddowes. So she used a fake name on a fake address. She doesn't have an address anyway, she's homeless. So it's that little detail that led people to believe that she might have been targeted by mistake, that the actual victim, the actual target, was Mary Jane Kelly, the last victim, and that because she had given that name to the police, they might have targeted her by accident. In that case, the police would be involved. Now, it's a good story. I think it's a bit far-fetched. And even if she had been targeted by accident, it's probably not because she gave that name to the police. When you use a fake name, when you use an alias, you often use the same, so you remember it's you. I actually use Kelly myself. When I go on a dodgy website on the internet and they want to ask for my name and I don't want to give it, I'll put Kelly down, because Kerio Natalie, if you cut the middle, that's Kelly. But I know it's me, so I use the same again. So I think because she lied to the police, it doesn't mean that she gave that name only to the police. Anyway, this is very modern, of course. So we are now on the famous Mitre Square. This is very modern, but the geography of the square has not changed too much. At the time, we're quite close to the docks, of course. We're close to the St. Catherine docks, where they used to receive a lot of cargo, but expensive stuff, tea, sugar, tobacco. So those goods were stored into warehouses around here. And that required police presence, because they wanted to make sure that nothing was stolen. So there was a police officer that was coming on his beat every 15 minutes. So at about 1:30 a.m., PC Edmund Watkins was walking down this way with his lantern. It would have been very dark. Yes, exactly, Marlene. And it would have been very dark with his lantern. He did not see anything of interest. So that's 1:30. 1:35 a.m., there's a gentleman that claims that he saw Mary Kelly at the corner just there, excuse my finger, but just there, talking to a gentleman. He actually identified the body at the morgue. He said it was her. So 1:35. Now 10 minutes later, PC Edmund Watkins comes back with his lantern, the exact same bit, and he comes over here. That's a new bench, by the way. They've just put it up. So he comes over here with his lantern. He had done that same route 15 minutes earlier. And then he spotted what he believed to be a drunken lady on the floor. He came a bit closer and he realized it was not a drunken lady. It was Catherine Eddowes. She had been brutally attacked. Her body was with a lot of blood. The killer had not only did he take her uterus and her kidney, but he had also cut off little squares into her cheeks. And her kidney was missing, which was interesting because a few days later, the Whitechapel Vigilante Committee received a package with half a kidney. Now, at the time, the forensic were really nothing compared to today. They were not actually even sure whether the kidney was human. At the time, they had hardly any forensics. And actually, the press got it wrong. The press published that it was human. When it was not, we didn't really know for sure. And the press published that the kidney suffered from Bright's disease. Eddowes did. So, to this day, we don't know whether the kidney was genuine or not. Maybe, but it probably was a prank, from students at the anatomy schools or whatever. And if the kidney came from one of those bodies at the anatomy school, they probably suffered from Bright disease anyway, because those bodies came from the workhouses, and very often they were unhealthy and alcoholics and all that. So we still don't know about the letter, but that gave it a bit of credibility, the fact that she was missing her kidney. So she was missing her kidney, one, and her uterus. So, people say, yeah, he might have been a doctor because he knows how to remove organs in the dark. Yeah, true. I mean, if you gave me a knife and you told me to look for my kidney, I'm not sure I would know where to find them. So yes, but do we know, did he actually want the kidney? Did he actually want the uterus? Did he maybe want two kidneys and found a uterus and a kidney? We don't know. So we give him a lot of anatomical knowledge when really we don't know if he even went for the right organs. Now, time to tell you about my favorite suspect, and then we'll get back into the Catherine Eddowes and Kosminski link that has been published all over the press last month, really. My favorite suspect, it's a chap called Tumblety. Let me show you his photograph. So this is Francis Tumblety, trying to frame my face like this. He was an American doctor. He was a quack. He was known as the great American doctor. He actually killed a few people in Liverpool by selling them some bad medicine, pretending that it came from Native Americans, but they were actually bad stuff and some people died. He, from Liverpool, he came down here. He stayed in a lodging house. He had been arrested for gruesome indecency with 5 guys. Today we'll translate that into homosexuality. Now, if you ask any profilers, they'll tell you it's very rare and almost impossible that a gay serial killer would target women. But allegedly he had an ex that he loved very much, a lady, so he might have been bisexual, and he was gutted because he found out that she was selling her body. So, maybe. The little detail that I have to say, the cons is that it doesn't really fit or match any of the physical descriptions. But I tend not to trust the eyewitnesses anyway on this story. But he was a bit too flamboyant with his huge moustache and stuff, and a bit too old as well, to match the description of the people that have allegedly seen someone on the street. But Yes, John, we don't know why. He's actually wearing army uniforms. He was never in the army. We don't know why he was doing that. But he was into the habit of wearing stuff like that. So yeah, very extravagant in terms of clothing. The little detail that makes me think it might be him, it's that first he left. He was a person of interest in the murders. They actually wanted to go and get him, but he had actually left. He exited towards France and then on a boat back to the US. He was from Rochester, New York. And then the police wanted to extradite him, but the US refused. So he never came back to the country. That was never actually published in the press over here, because Scotland Yard might have been a bit ashamed of letting a suspect run away. And years later, some of his friends stated that they had once been invited to his basement, where he proudly showed them a collection of uteruses in little jars of alcohol or formol or glycerine. And he stated, I have a collection of uteri from ladies of all social classes. That was in the 1860s, so that would have been before the murders. So even if that story is true, that would not have been the uterus taken from the victims. But we know he had an interest into uteruses. Was it just a weirdo, or was it just a pervert, or was he actually studying the uteruses and trying to run some illegal abortions and stuff? We don't know. There was big money to be made with illegal abortions at the time. And the little detail that makes me think, it might not even be true, but allegedly when he died many years later in Rochester, they said that in his possession, he had a lot of, fancy items of clothing and all that, but it is said that in his possession, he had 2 fake little rings, similar or maybe identical to the ones missing on Annie Chapman's body. Because we know now, of course, we know much more about serial killers now, and we know they often take a little souvenir. And on top of that, he potentially suffered from some erectile dysfunctions. We know now that the sexual serial killers, they often have this type of problems as well. So, that's why he's my number one. But there are many more, of course. And let's go back to Kosminski and the DNA story. Now, that DNA story, so some of you might not know what I'm talking about. A couple of weeks ago, it was all over the press again, all over the news, even the American news, that the identity of the Ripper had been revealed by DNA. We had him. It was Kosminski. I'm not going to show you the photo because I completely disagree, but they even produced an AI version of his face. It's a pure work of fiction. It's not his face, it's AI. But anyway, so it was all over the press again. And this is not a new story. This actually came out in September 2014. And I can tell you that for sure because at the time, that's actually a funny story. At the time, I used to work as a zombie for the London Bridge experience. It's under the London Bridge. So I was dressed up as a zombie actor. And when I first started, I was more or less dressed up as a Victorian prostitute. At the beginning, loosely based on a Victorian outfit, but I didn't look Victorian at all. A few months later, I was going heavy on the makeup. I looked more like a dead pirate. But anyhow, so I would have been on the street approaching people to get them into the attraction, mainly to steal customers from the London dungeons, or entertaining people in the queue when we had a bit of a queue. So I was never an actor inside. I was outside entertaining the queue. Anyway, one morning, I had to be seen talking to people. If the managers came out and I was not talking to anyone, I'll be in trouble. So I would chat to anyone, including local workers. London Bridge, you have a lot of people going to work, those city boys. And one morning in September, one guy came along. He didn't stop. I just said hello, and he said to me, I thought he said to me, I hear you got sperm on your dress. No, on your skirt. And I just turned around. I was like, what? And he was not the type of guy that would take the mickey. He was a city boy going to his work in the city. And I had met him before. I think he was not a vulgar guy. He was just a normal guy. I was like, what? So I was like, what? And he said, sperm on your skirt. And I was like, what? And then I actually thought maybe I had, because there were a lot of pigeons on the London Bridge station. You have those kind of mini railings at the top, and a lot of pigeons, they sit there and they shit on you. So I was like, oh crap. Obviously I don't have sperm on my skirt. I was like, maybe I got a pigeon poo on my bum. So I actually was trying to look at my bum and I couldn't see. So I went back to my green room, took my skirt off, and there was no pigeon poo. So all day I was like, why would he say that? Why would a normal guy tell me I've got sperm on my skirt? Because he was not the type of guy that would take the mickey, And when I jumped on the train in the evening, they had the Evening Standard or the Metro paper or whatever it was, and it said Jack the Ripper victim, sperm, DNA, blah blah blah. And I was like, oh, I got it. I got sperm on my skirt. Duh. But yeah. So anyway, so that was in 2014. Nothing new has happened since. But let me tell you, the guy actually, there's a ripologist, if we can call him a ripologist, at the time. So his name is Russell Edwards. He basically published a book in 2014, but there's been a re-editing of the book last month. So they've brought the story to the press again and again when there's nothing new. So what happened is, allegedly over here, when they found Catherine's body, it is said that there was a gentleman on the spot, a police officer from the Met. His name was Amos Simpson. Now, the guy had nothing to do there. He was a police officer, but he was actually working for the Met. So this is the City of London Police. So as far as we know, there was no Metropolitan Police officer here. And he actually was, he was not even based here. He was based in Cheshunt. It's just above Enfield, really. And he allegedly, they would have found with the body what is described as a shawl, but it might not have been a shawl. It might have been a table runner. Those kind of like a tablecloth, really, that would have been used as a shawl. And again, allegedly, the city police officer would have just given it to Amos, when everything else on the crime scene and all the belongings of the victims were recorded and everything. Somehow the police officer would have told Amos, yeah, you take it, you give it to your wife. Right. So they oh, that's amazing, Joy. Oh, that's cool. So yeah, those descendants. So Amos would have then given it to his sister. I don't know why he didn't give it to his own kids. And then the sister would have given it to her daughter, and then her daughter, and then her son. So the table runner or the shawl stayed in the family for a few generations. And then, what a coincidence, it resurfaces in 1988. So just 100 years after the murders, in Essex, in an antique dealer. And eventually they cut it off. I mean, when do you see an antique dealer cutting off a piece of an item they've got. So they cut off a piece to keep a little souvenir, and then it ended up in the possession of the Black Museum. The Black Museum, it's the police museum, the Scotland Yard Museum, but it's not really open to the public. They did not expose it because they were not sure of the provenance. And in 2007, it was actually bought by Russell Edward. And he decided to do some DNA testing on the shawl. Allegedly, they found a trace of sperm. Now, Russell actually claims that the shawl would belong to Kosminski, not to Eddowes. Because they know if we say it belongs to Eddowes, well, first, Eddowes, if she had a silk item, she would have sold it. She would have brought it to the pawn shop to get some alcohol, you know. And also, Eddowes, if indeed she was a sex worker, she could have had a lot of sperm from anyone on that shawl because she didn't have a washing machine, you know. She was homeless. So in that theory, the shawl would actually belong to Kosminski. I don't know why a serial killer would carry his stable runner with him. So then they did DNA test on the descendants. So there's a lady called Katie Miller. She's a descendant of Catherine Eddowes. So they took DNA from her on a little alleged blood spot on the shawl, and then on the alleged sperm on the shawl. The scientist that did that, his name was Yari, and then bingo, a match. Allegedly, there was a very rare gene that was found in the mDNA. So the DNA, you know, it degrades very quickly. You don't get good DNA from any items that are over 100 years. But mDNA, mitochondrial DNA, it's not as precise, but it lasts a bit younger. So that's the DNA you get from your mother. And so allegedly, yes, there was a very rare gene, and there was a match. So it was indeed that placed the two of them on the scene of the crime, and then officially Kosminski would have killed Eddowes. So then Kosminski is Jack the Ripper? No. Even if it was true, that would only prove that Kosminski and Eddowes were in contact at some point. It wouldn't prove that Kosminski had killed any of the others. And it's not true anyway. Very quickly, mistakes were exposed. He had done a very big error of nomenclature. There's a gene. It's 314 dot whatever, and it was actually meant to be 315 dot whatever. So the very, very, very rare genetic mutation was actually a very, very, very common gene that 99% of the population had. So it was that completely undermined the DNA findings, and it's basically nothing. It's basically completely wrong. And, you know, when you publish such genetic or any scientific findings, you should have it reviewed by any of your peers anyway. Never did Yari do that. So the claims were already dismissed 10 years ago. And now, because he's republishing his book, it comes back to reality. And apparently in 2024, they tried to review it. And Yari said he couldn't actually produce the work, it was lost. So, I mean, how do you want us to believe it if you lose your work? But anyway, the DNA tests were wrong, and the shawl is wrong anyway. I mean, there's a slight possibility that the shawl would be real. I really don't see how. And even there was an expert that dated the shawl. They said it actually dated back from the beginning of the 20th century, but it could be a little bit older. So it could be the right period. And if really a Metropolitan Police officer had magically got on the spot and was magically given the shawl, maybe, but it's really, really far-fetched. And there's no genetical basis that can stand criticism. It's just not there. So I find it astonishing that it's again in the press, you know. if they did some tests again and if they were actually approved by many scientists, but why should you trust only the one guy that has an interest in selling books, and the Russell Edwards is actually an interesting character. You might remember, I think it was in 2002, at the beginning of the 2000, there was a guy that claimed that they had located the body of Keith Bennett, the poor little victim of Ian Brady on Mira Hindley, the last one that was not recovered yet. So it was all over the press, and Manchester police wasted a lot of time, and it was fake. It was just fake news as well. And that was the same guy. It was actually Russell Edwards again. So again, it's just a lot of noise about nothing. So yeah, that DNA theory, I think you might have noticed, I don't buy in at all. And it's a shame because, there are some good reasons to believe that Kosminski might have been responsible. I don't believe so, but I agree that it ticks a few of the boxes. Sadly, with some people just coming with random fake news, it can actually undermined Kosminski as a good suspect because of that. So yeah, just a lot of articles about nothing really. Anyway, it's gonna be the end of the tour. I'm gonna flip this camera around, and yes, exactly, Gregory. We shouldn't believe much of. Well, to be honest, to double check the sources on that one, it's a bit complicated because in terms of DNA, I guess it's fair to say that most of us don't understand anything anyway. If you wanted to get more detail about the show on all that story, there's a ripologist that's very good. He's actually a great fan of the Lechmere theory. His name is on YouTube. He's called House of Lechmere, and he's done a couple of few videos about the story of the show and all that. So he actually debunks the theory. Thank you, Joy. Thanks everyone for coming today. It's always a pleasure to have you along. And thank you very much, Pauline. Thanks everyone that leaves a little tip, even if it's not on YouTube, but it's on Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. I'll see them in a moment, but it's very much appreciated. It is thanks to your generosity that I can keep going. And yes, the YouTube channel, Marlene, it's House of Lechmere. I think the ripologist is Edward Stowe, I think his name is. He does, he's a great fan of the Lechmere theory, but he's done a video to debunk the shoal. Oh, thank you, Marlene. Cool, thanks everyone. If you wanted to see a bit more of me, in 2 days I'm doing a live at home to throw the dice on the Monopoly board to see which Monopoly location we'll explore next week. Not next week, next time. It might be next month. Cool. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions about anything before we go. Thanks, Janice. Thanks, Nick. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. Oh, Richard, thanks. Nice to see you here. Cool, I don't see any more questions, so I'm gonna let you go. Have a great morning or a great evening, great afternoon, good night, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And if any of you were completely new to me, if you've just randomly clicked on that live or on that video, I hope I got you hooked, and I hope you'll come back. If you want to make sure you catch the live, what you want to do is to subscribe to the channel. And then you want to hit the little, if you hit the little notification thing, you can get a notification when I go live. Because it's much more fun to watch them live and being able to interact in the chat rather than watching the replay afterwards. I'll be doing some scheduling tomorrow, so at some point next week. Well, in 2 days I've got a little live, but it's not a tour on the street. It's just me at home throwing the dice on the Monopoly board to see what Monopoly location we'll explore next time. But the actual next live on the street, that'll be next week at some point. Oh, thank you, Joy. Yeah, I love to go back into the chat and see that. That's going to be interesting. Oh yeah, thank you, Marlene. Yes, absolutely. If you have time to give the video a little like, it helps with the algorithms. So it helps more people discovering the channel. So that's always a plus. Cool. Thank you, guys. Have a great evening or a good morning or whatever. And I'll see you soon. Bye bye.